Okay, good afternoon. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Artist Talk with Lisa Congdon. I'm Lauren MacDonald. I'm Dean of the Library and Academic Resources and Executive Director for the Museum of Art. And the Artist Talk with Lisa Congdon is St. Mary College Museum of Art's first public program of the Fall Exhibition Series for 2023. Today, Lisa is going to share insight into her current body of work in the exhibition Hold It Lightly and more about her artistic journey. The exhibits this fall highlight the intersection of social justice, art, and activism. The Heroes and Sheroes series by Corita Kent and Hold It Lightly by Lisa Congdon are exhibited in conversation. Both of these women artists bravely approach themes of social justice with radical joy. But it is my pleasure to introduce Lisa Congdon, internationally acclaimed fine artist, illustrator, and author. Lisa makes art for clients around the world, including Target, Amazon, Google, Schwinn, Madewell, Brooks Running, Warby Parker, REI, and maybe most importantly, the Library of Congress. And many more, but that's just a few. She is the author of 10 books, including Art Inc., The Essential Guide to Building Your Career as an Artist, and Find Your Artistic Voice, The Essential Guide to Working Your Creative Magic. And I will note that the books are on display and in the library for you to check out. So head on down. We have a lot of librarians in the audience today, I see. She's the host of the podcast, The Lisa Congdon Sessions, and co-founder of the Long Table Foundation, and a member of the Museum of Art Advisory Board. We are proud also that Lisa is a Gale. She graduated from St. Mary's College with a bachelor's in history in 1990, and her work has been exhibited at a number of galleries and museums, but Hold It Lightly is her first solo museum exhibit and the first alumni solo show at the Museum of Art. Lisa is a self-taught artist who dedicated herself to her art in her late 30s. As an artist, Lisa is that rare example of a creative who bravely approaches themes of social justice with radical joy while engaging with the viewer as an instructor and a mentor. Hold It Lightly and Heroes and Sheroes are on exhibit through December 10th, and the museum is open Wednesdays through Sunday 10 to 4. So the MOA is free, so come and visit. Immerse yourself in bold colors and messages of hope and joy, and get a catalog to keep the exhibit alive after the show ends. So these are for sale in the museum shop, and there is now one catalog and ready for checkout in the library as well. Personally, it has been an experience of radical joy working with Lisa and her team, bringing this exhibit to life. So please join me in welcoming Lisa Congdon.
Hello. So good to be here. And I haven't been in this theater in probably 33 years. And as I walked in, I was like, yep, it looks the same. Lots of parts of this campus have changed a lot since I went to school here, but a lot of things look exactly the same. And this theater is one of those places. So it was really weird walking in. So this is me. This is my dog, Milkshake. And Milkshake, I always love to show this slide because you can see that Milkshake is the subject of a lot of my work. The very first drawing I ever made of Milkshake was the one in the bottom right corner where she's drinking a milkshake. We call her Milky for short. And from there, I just started using her in some illustrations that I was doing. So for example, to the left of her is, I did a bunch of work last year for the Rockefeller Center in New York City. And she's being walked by some random New York guy. You can see, and above her in the bottom corner on the top, she's the main character in a children's book written by legendary children's book author Cynthia Rylant called Rain. And so she's like one of the joys of my life, so I always like to show pictures of her. This is where you can find me on social media. On Instagram, it's just my name. The benefit to being an early adopter to social media is that you actually get your name. Because believe it or not, I'm not the only Lisa Congdon in the world. As Lauren mentioned earlier, I went to St. Mary's from 1986 until 1990. And yes, I keep everything. My employees are tasked with keeping archives of all of my artwork. And before I became an artist, I kept pretty much everything from various periods in my life. And these are my 4 ID cards from when I was here. And my time here was truly one of the happiest in my life. And actually, several of my dear friends are in the audience and have been at the events over the last 2 nights. And it's just been such a joy to hang out and reconnect in this place. So some fun facts. I worked at the registrar's office for 2 years, I think my sophomore year, my junior year. And I was an RA in De La Salle Hall, 3rd floor. I was a history major, as Lauren mentioned. I was studying for midterms in October in the library when the 1989 earthquake hit. And if you go to the exhibit, if you haven't been yet, there is a room dedicated to memorabilia from my time here, and there's like they blew up the cover of the Collegian, which is the college newspaper, that shows the rubble that was the inside of the library that I was in when the earthquake hit. And there's actually a quote from me that got published in that newspaper article, which you can also read. I still dream I am late to a math exam, and that I've not prepared for, or that I am wandering the halls of some random building here at St. Mary's looking for Brother Ronald to turn in a paper that is late. You may leave St. Mary's, but it will never leave you. I'm going to show you now some pictures of my time here with friends. Lots of parties in dorms. That's me with the high-waisted jeans and the belt. This was obviously somebody's birthday. Another dorm luau party. I believe this was my sophomore year. This is my favorite. Some big hair. This was, I think, around 1988-ish. So that was how we rolled. So me and Kelly, who's in the audience right now, and just as great. We often had 70s parties, which is really weird to think about because this was in like the mid to late 80s. Like it had only been a decade. And we were already going to thrift stores and trying to dress up as 70s as possible, which at the time wasn't very hard because thrift stores were filled with, clothes that were only recently out of date. And these are my friends. Oh, that's me in the center, but these are my friends Kelly and Katie, who are both here today. Some more celebrations. This was obviously one of my birthdays. I don't know how old I was, but some sort of celebration with friends up at the Cross, which as you drive in, for those of you who aren't alumni or don't work here, or don't go to school here, the Cross is up on the hill behind the college, and we would hike up there a lot. Lots of keggers. Another thing we did a lot of is had formal dances. When we were going through my, Kelly, you appear in a lot of these photos. Anyway, when we were going through my photo albums, I believe it was Kate or Leah, somebody asked, who are the archivists here, like, or somebody was sitting around and said, like, there's a lot of dressing up in your photo albums. And I was like, yeah, we had formals like every 2 months. Sometimes here on campus, and the brothers would serve us their delicious wine, or we would go to San Francisco. And I think this was one in San Francisco, but it was really kind of a special thing that we did. We dressed up and had parties a lot back in the day. Here's some more dorm pictures. These are some of my fellow residents when I lived in Sabati Hall, and my roommate Amy. Another 70s party. Here you can see some of the guys in their fashion. This was on my graduation day. And another, Amy, you just missed a photo of yourself. I'm going to have to go back. Amy was my roommate, and
we're so cute.
Yes, we were. And notice the Dukakis poster over Amy's bed. Yeah. Anyway, okay, back to business here. And this is probably a photo that I took of the college right before I graduated on some hike up on the hill. And here I am receiving my diploma. And there's a big blow up of this at the exhibit. Okay, I'm done talking about, I'm done with my walk down memory lane. So a little bit about me, for those of you who aren't familiar. I have a multidisciplinary art practice, which means I do lots of different things. If you walk into the museum, you'll see 57 different serigraphs, which are screen prints. I'm going to talk a little bit about those in a moment. But I do lots of other things. And one of the things I don't do as much of as I like is improvisational quilting, which you see on the left. Sorry if things are a little blurred. I think it's because of my podium, maybe. I do some ceramics, and I do some photography. So I collect lots of old things, including like heaps of old erasers and office supplies. And I have boxes and cases of things at my studio. I've been collecting things since I was in my 20s. And I arrange them by color and take photographs of them and sell prints of them. So you can find those in my online shop. I also do a fair amount of collage and book arts. And this is a piece I made for a show a few years back. I make and show original work. This is known as my fine art practice, which sort of differentiates it from my illustration practice, which I'll talk about in a minute. This is a show I had at Stephanie Chiffa's Projects, which is a gallery in Portland that represents me. Here's some work from another show. It's when I made some three-dimensional wooden houses. The large painting in back is painted on raw canvas. Stephanie has a new location now, and I just had a show there in January called The Opposite of Sorrow. And here are some images from that. I also own a shop that exists both online and at a location in Portland. We just moved to a new location that's open 7 days a week inside a bigger shop called Cargo. So if you're ever in Portland, it's a really great place to not just see my work, but see the work of a lot of independent, mostly female artists in Portland. We also design and produce our own products, and I license my work to brands and companies. I did this big campaign with Method a few years ago, so if you saw some of these in Target, that was me. And I do illustration commissions for brands, nonprofits, and small businesses. So I did some running shoes for Brooks, this year's poster for the National Book Festival, commissioned by the Librarian of Congress. Aside from having a solo show here, I think the other highlight of my career was having her select me to design this year's poster, which also ended up all over the book festival and backdrops to famous authors giving talks, and it was really exciting. It's a t-shirt that I did for Madewell a couple of years ago. I also write and illustrate books. I've published around 10 of my own, but I illustrate other people's books as well, including children's books. And there are copies, I think, of a lot of these at the exhibit and in the library. I don't do this alone. I have a team of 2 full-time employees and 2 part-time folks who work for me, plus a graphic designer. And I am so fortunate to be able to engage a whole team of people to make beautiful things, which is what I love to do. Some themes in my work. I love grids. So, I mean, not a literal grid, but like I'm really all about symmetry and balance. So as you're looking at my work in the museum, take note, because I'm always thinking of a grid in the background of whatever I draw. Tight arrangements of things, flora and fauna, repeating shapes. A little girl came up to me last night and told me that she loved my work, especially my mismatched shapes. It was really sweet, so I took that as a compliment. Lots of symbols and symbolism, both symbolism from my own sort of personal repertoire of personal symbols and more common symbols that you find in many cultures. Folk art and influence in quilt imagery are really strong influences in my work. Playing with lettering and letter forms, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Bright color and a limited color palette. So the show, Amy, how many colors did we? Maybe a maximum of 10 colors. Sometimes I make most of my illustrations with between 5 and 7 colors, which gives my work a sort of like cohesive feel. And messages, either written or visual, dealing with mental health and well-being, vulnerability, joy, risk-taking, social justice, and the realities of living a creative life. I also am an avid cyclist and bike racer. I started racing competitively when I was 52, and I'm about to turn 56 in January, so it's only been about 4 years, but I'm getting on lots of podiums lately. And the reason I'm so dirty in the picture on the right is because gravel cycling is my new love, and it's very dirty and very messy, but I absolutely love it. And I work with a coach and just have a whole community of friends around cycling, and I do lots of work for cycling brands. So, and cycling events, designing posters for races and working with different cycling companies. This is a bike that I designed, which you can't really see the detail of very well, but this is the day I picked it up in March. But it's a custom bike that I had built by a company in Bend, Oregon called Argonaut, and I got to design the frame, and they hand painted it for me. So that was really fun. So my art ends up everywhere. Sometime in early November 2022, I got an email from Britt Royer. She's the curator at the museum here. I remember it was evening, and I was catching up on messages after a busy day at the studio. Britt was writing to ask if I would be interested in a collaborative exhibit at the museum alongside pop artist Corita Kent. I had to go back and read the email several times to make sure I understood. I was not only being invited to have my first museum exhibition, which alone is career-defining, but also to show alongside Sister Corita, an artist who's had a profound impact on both my work and my creative process. There are few moments in an artist's life when opportunities come that feel almost spiritual in their gravity. This was one for me. Corita Kent, and this is a kind of a montage of her work from the Corita Center's website. She was also known as Sister Mary Corita, was born in 1918 and died in 1986, which is incidentally the year I entered St. Mary's. And she was an incredible pop artist who made work in the 60s and 70s and into the early 80s. She has long been one of my art idols, and I have admired her work for eons. At age 18, she entered the religious order, the Immaculate Heart of Mary, eventually teaching and then heading the art department at Immaculate Heart College, which is in Los Angeles. During the course of her career, her artwork evolved from using figurative and religious imagery to incorporating advertising images and slogans, popular song lyrics, Bible verses, and literature. Throughout the 60s, her work became increasingly political, urging viewers to consider poverty, racism, and social injustice. In 1968, she left the order and moved to Boston. That's actually the year that I was born, so also interesting. She left the order and moved to Boston, and after 1970, her work evolved into a sparser, introspective style, influenced by living in a new environment, a secular life, and her battles with cancer. She remained active in social causes until her death in 1986, and at the time of her death, she had created almost 800 serigraph editions, thousands of watercolors, and innumerable public and private commissions. And you can see her work in the museum. There's just a small body of work that she created between 1968 and I think the early 70s called Sheroes and Heroes. And but if you enjoy that, I highly encourage you, if you're not familiar with her work already, to just Google her and or go to the Corita Center's website and check out all the vast amount of work that she created, some of which is pictured in small thumbnails here. Here's an image of Sister Corita working with students at Immaculate Heart in Los Angeles. She's teaching about making a serigraph. All the work you see hanging on the walls of the museum, both Corita's work and my work, are serigraphs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about serography, which is also known as silk screening, screen printing, or serigraph printing. And it's a stencil-based printing process in which you burn an image into a fabric screen. Back in the day, they used silk. Today, they use like finely woven polyester or nylon. Serography is a fancy term for silkscreen printing, coming from seri, which is Latin for silk, and graphos, which is ancient Greek for writing. A screen is stretched over wood or an aluminum frame, and here are some screens from a screen print that I worked on with one of my screen printers. I don't do my own screen printing, I'm just going to be honest. We have a couple of screen printers, actually 3 now, that we work with, who are all based in Portland, where I live. But you can see images of screens, and these are all layers of a piece, which I'm going to show you in a second. Because we have to make sure that each color is a separate screen. And there's this thing called registration. So when you're laying these down on top of the paper, you have to make sure that they go in exactly the right spot so that everything comes out exactly where it needs to go. So the screen is placed on top of the paper, the ink is placed on the screen, and then a rubber bladed squeegee is used to spread the ink evenly over the screen, allowing the ink to pass through the open spaces on the paper below. So it's interesting to note, in a lot of Corita's work, you'll see many colors. And anytime you're making a serigraph that includes many colors, it's just more complicated because you're dealing with like that many more chances that something would get messed up or not be the right registration. Screen printing uses thick ink, which allows for a final print that has great color density, saturation, and texture. And that's why we really love it. It almost looks like a painting. And so these screens up here all made this poster, which is for sale in my shop. And I'm not saying that because you need to go buy it, but these are things that I actually make to sell. And this one is called Two Doves. I once heard Corita Kent described as a joyous revolutionary, and that just resonated for me so much. I've always understood art, including my own work, to be about the human struggle in some way. And I think for a long time, I also thought that meant that in order for my work to be taken seriously, it had to be dark or edgy or come from a place of discontent. We've all heard the trope of the struggling or depressed artist, right? And so there was this disconnect for me because my work is not just about joy and hopefulness, it is joyful and hopeful. And Corita was really a model for me of someone who also made artwork that, even when it was about serious topics, was also joyful and playful in its colors and graphic lettering and imagery. This is a piece that I made, this Joyous Revolutionary piece, which you also see a little poster of here. There's bigger posters also in the show, and paying homage to Sister Corita. I now understand that joy is radical. As human beings, we like to make everything sit at opposite ends of the binary. We are either happy or sad, good or evil, morally right or morally wrong. So the idea of being both a revolutionary in this broken world and at the same time being joyful means you acknowledge and experience both ends of the spectrum. I've learned that both can exist, and that when you are someone who faces darkness head on and at the same time chooses and allows herself to feel joy, that makes joy radical. I was talking the other day to a close friend of mine whose brother just took his own life. This friend was struggling to hold both the joy he felt in his life for his art practice, his friendships, and his girlfriend. He was struggling to hold that with the intense grief he felt over his brother's death. He felt guilt because he felt like he could only feel grief, and he had to set aside any joy or happiness. And that's something I think we can all relate to. We are cultured to believe we can't, and that we are not allowed to hold two feelings at the opposite ends of that binary at the same time. I encouraged him to find a way to hold all of it, and that having one does not erase the other or shouldn't make him feel ashamed for having the other, and that he could have both. And I think that's why making joyful work is revolutionary, and that's why joy is radical, because our society tells us that we can't have it. If we are also feeling pain or anguish, or if we don't feel like we belong, we have to continue to fight for joy. This concept brings me to the concept of holding something lightly. This paradox of caring deeply about something or someone, and also letting go of attachment, is only possible when we actively strive towards something, while at the same time knowing and accepting that that desired outcome may not happen. This concept of embracing that paradox centers my work and reflects my commitment to honoring the opposite edges of the human experience. Things like attachment and allowing, grief and joy, having boundaries and serving others, having affinity with others and loving those who are different from you unconditionally. To hold it lightly doesn't mean you don't love deeply or want something badly. It simply means you do that knowing you are not entitled to that thing and that life is not in your control. It is one of the most freeing lessons I have ever learned. One of the underpinnings of my practice is this notion of art as play. And that notion is also integral to what Corita lived, wrote, and taught in her lifetime. I started making art after a very dark, very self-critical, very melancholy decade of my life in my 20s. And so for me, art has always been both about play and about reclaiming my own relationship to joy and things that make me happy. My own relationship to joy and a sense of play or deserving love or joy was really messed up for many years as a young queer woman in this culture that can be very hateful and exclusionary. Over the years, as I have learned to embrace joy and as I understand that I deserve to feel and that we all deserve to feel joy, my work has become more colorful, more graphic, bolder, and more playful. I use my work to tell the story of my life and what I know to be true through words, symbols, and color. I revel waking up in the morning to do this work because it brings me incredible joy and literally feels like play. The image above is one of the rooms in my exhibition and is intentionally designed to feel playful and bring you back to the joy of childhood. This is an image of Corita and her students in the art department at Immaculate Heart. Notice the wonderful posters on the walls and the sculptures hanging from the ceiling. This is a playful environment and one that I want to hop right into and be part of. Another connection Corita and I have with one another is our use of our own style of hand lettering in our work to express messages. Lettering is a tool, but it's also an art form in and of itself. A value that is imbued in my art and inherent in my work is a sense of responsibility to stand up for marginalized people, to offer hope, healing, and comfort, and radical love. And my art offers me an opportunity to express those messages with color and imagery. Corita also used her work to encourage hope, speak out against war, encourage people to vote, and speak out against racism. When I was in my 30s, I worked really intensively with a therapist, and she introduced me to this idea that I had agency. That is, control and power to focus on and nurture my own path in life, and that I could choose to dream big about what I wanted my life to become and really work toward my hopes and dreams. That I got to choose how I showed up in the world. And connected to that was this notion that when I failed or made a mistake or something bad happened, I could learn from it and move on without beating myself up. This idea was sort of revolutionary to me. I had previously come from this completely different perspective in my life as a young woman, that I had no agency in my life or in the world, and that I was a victim of circumstances or bad luck. And so this idea that my therapist introduced me to literally changed my life. I became obsessed with this idea of being an agent of my future. And so within a couple of years, I went from being really unhappy to feeling enormous power and determination to shape my future. It was around this time that I began making art. So making art became associated with a confidence that I could create a new life for myself. Art and my sense of agency weren't separate. I was suddenly searching for things that I wanted to do for the first time in my life. What did I want? Who did I want to become? Who did I want to be? And what did I want to do? That's all a long way of saying that so much of what I make art about is what I've learned about makes me feel centered and connected to the world, both emotionally and spiritually. And that includes what makes me feel engaged and hopeful, especially now when the world feels so divided and broken and cruel. Art became my tether to a meaningful life. I encourage all of you to think about this question as you leave here today, this question that is on the screen. Do you know what work brings you alive? If you don't, make it your work to search for and find it. And make the experience of searching for it joyful. The journey, the failures, the mistakes, the wrong turns, are what will lead you to that work. Own all of your experience, the good, the hard, the accomplishments, everything that makes you different from other people. There is nothing wrong with you. All you have to do is take responsibility when you mess up or hurt others. You are perfect, lovable, and worthy, just as you are. Thank you. That was short on purpose, but we are going to take questions if anybody wants to stick around and ask me any question you want about the show or my work or anything like that. Yeah, go for it.
Hi, thank you so much. I was curious if you could speak to the process of designing the inauguration poster and how that came to be. And yeah, and it seems like a lot of pressure, but also such a beautiful opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. So for those of you who don't know, in about November of 2021, which was what, 2 years ago, I was contacted by the Biden inaugural committee to design a contemporary version of the invitation to the inauguration, and just for them to show on social media or whatever. And so, and it was pro bono, can't pay. So I was really busy at the time. I had a ton of other work, so I put it off until literally like January 19th or something. It was like, and I was in such a hurry that I basically created it using different parts of other pieces of art that I had made already and kind of slapped it together. So anyways, I sent it off, they posted it, I posted it, and it went viral. I don't have a photo of it in here, but anyways, it went viral, and then people were like, can I buy this? And so I asked permission, and they said sure, and so we sold it for just like a regular print. It was 11 by 14 inches, and in like 2 or 3 days, we sold 3,000, something like that. And we actually we normally print in-house we had to outsource printing and hire extra help to help us pack and ship everything. It was pretty nuts. And but we raised $20,000 for Fair Fight, which is Stacey Abrams' voting rights organization. So, because we made a lot of money, so we wanted to give some of it away. So that was really great. Anyway, I did it really fast, and it was like, I wasn't even particularly proud of it, and that just goes to show you, in my line of work, you can work really hard on something and nobody pays attention to it, and you can slap something together in 5 minutes, and it goes viral on the internet. And so it's a very joyful piece of art. I just had to copy the writing that was on the actual invitation and like hand lettered it and made some illustrations, and yeah. So.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just curious, I know it's something like being a working artist when like so much of your heart and passion is in your work, but then you're working for pay or you're making something for a client. I know that it can be kind of a struggle to like keep that work and play together and keep that passion for it. So like how do you find time to like explore or to like reinvigorate yourself when you feel like maybe burnt out?
Yeah, what's interesting is like I made a major shift in the last year. If any of you follow me on social media, you know I made this post that was called Loud Quitting, and it was about like how I basically went into 2023. Is that what we're in? 2023, sorry. It's so close to 2024, I'm already there. Anyway, I went into 2023 and I quit my podcast. I mean, you can still listen to it, but I quit recording it. I stopped taking as much client work. I quit drinking. I quit working 5 days a week, or essentially what was formerly like probably 60 hours a week, and I no longer work on Fridays. I just quit all kinds of things to try to like reclaim some sense of peace in my life, because it's really it's very like to be in this position where my career sort of blew up. It's continually been on the rise for many years, and I didn't start drawing or painting till I was in my early 30s. But you know, to say no when so many people want to work with you, and like it sounds like a good problem to have, and it certainly was, but I was caught up in, I'm very much a people pleaser, so I was caught up in like taking every project that came my way and having a hard time saying no to some really beautiful opportunities. And what happened after a while is that I got really exhausted and tired and burned out and almost resentful, and I realized that I needed to really pull back. And that started to happen in 2016, and it wasn't until 2023 that I really made some major changes toward like having more peace in my life. So it is really hard. And the way that I mean, I've always sort of made personal work, and a lot of that in my busier days was like watching Netflix and drawing on my iPad at the same time, or taking more meaningful personal commissions from people to balance out my client work. I also have a history of choosing client work that for the most part is really meaningful and with organizations that I believe in and companies that are doing good work. Amazon aside. But that job was actually pretty spectacular. I designed the back to school, all the illustrations for the back to school website last year, or the year before maybe. I'm losing track of time. It's a hard balance to strike, and one that's really important to me. And at this point in my career, I feel like I can be choosy about what work I take and what work I don't. This year has been a dream, because I've really had to stop doing any client work to prepare for this show, because it was so much work, and I have another show that opens in 3 weeks in Philadelphia, so I'm also madly trying to finish the work for that, because we have to ship it a week from today. So anyway, so I've been, really busy working on personal work this year, almost to the point where I'm like, give me a client job where I don't really have to care as much, Not that I don't care about my client jobs, but there is like an investment that I have in my personal work that I don't have. It's like a natural detachment that you have when you're working for clients. Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi, Lisa. I have a question about kind of your art practice and art making. I really resonate with how you are a multi-hyphenate artist and kind of have your hands in all these different pots, and your work goes into all these different containers. And I'm wondering, I often get myself stuck with thinking about the outcome, or like where it's going to go, or the specific definition of what I'm trying to be, illustrator, fine artist, what have you. And I'm wondering, would your advice be to just like go for the thing, follow the thing that is calling you most creatively, and just make the work and be less attached to where it ends up, or kind of the specific definition, and kind of allow it to take form as it will?
Yes. I think that first and foremost, your first filter needs to be what's interesting to you. And what are you passionate about? What do you want to make work about or of, right? And don't worry about whether it's conceptual or has any meaning to anybody else. If you freaking like to draw flowers all day, then that's what you do. Just anything that lights you up or makes you happy. Obviously, if you want a career as an artist, you have to think about the container a little bit. For example, I run this foundation/collective called the Long Table Foundation, and we grant mentorship. My friend Emily and I, she owns Emily McDowell Studios, and Friends. We mentor like 6 BIPOC artists a year who around licensing, illustration, product manufacturing. And we were just having this conversation the other day about like thinking about where your work ends up. And we have one guy in the group, George, who really wants to be an editorial illustrator, meaning he wants to illustrate for magazines and newspapers. There is a certain thing that he needs to have in his portfolio that lends itself to that. There's maybe somebody else who wants to be a surface designer and do wallpaper, and she needs to make that stuff. So to a certain extent, there's the subject matter, and then there's the like form it takes. So you want to think about that a little bit, but it's secondary to the subject matter. And the subject matter should always come first, and then the filter, for sure. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. We could talk about this all day. But.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell a little bit about how you shift gears? You must have to shift between your art focus, your political focuses, your business choices. How do you make those transitions?
Well, they all feel connected to me, so I don't necessarily, it's like, my art, all art is political in my opinion, but so my art and my politics and my community service and my my life are all intertwined, so it doesn't feel as like I don't compartmentalize them. I think for me the hardest thing to do is like take time for myself, and that's what I'm really working on right now, and not to feel guilty about that. I think as middle-aged women, many of us deal with that. I don't even have kids, and I deal with it, and a lot of my friends who have children, I think it's even harder, but like putting myself and my own needs first, knowing that if I do that, I'm gonna make better work, I'm gonna have more energy for the work that I do, whether it's political or art or even my cycling, which is actually part of how I take care of myself, is just riding my bike a lot. So for me, they're so interconnected that I don't really like have to step away from one. Sometimes I do feel like I'll go through a period where most of my work is overtly political. Like there was a period where that was all I did and all I talked about. And there's some days where I would just be like, I'm gonna post this totally benign image, because I feel like I need to take a break from it and from the conversation that ensues on social media when I post something. So yeah, there are times when I need to step away, but it feels so connected that it's hard for me to do that, for better or for worse. Yeah.
Just along the same lines.
I'm so hot right now.
Oh, you're so hot. Just along those same lines. One, I loved your podcast, and I'm glad you took a break from it.
Thank you.
You'll come back sometime. and love all your work, and you've been such an inspiration to me on so many levels. Thank you for all your gifts. What was my question? I lost it. What would be the best day? What's a day in the life of Lisa Congdon like? What would be your happiest day?
A happy day for me would be getting up and eating a big breakfast, and then meeting Serena, Sarah, Irene, and CJ for a bike ride. And we would ride for like 45 miles, and then I would come home, eat a big lunch, and then go downstairs and watch some trashy program on Netflix and draw, and then eat dinner. And I do that lots of Saturdays, so yeah.
As someone who posts quite a bit, like the internet, we've talked about going viral and things like that, and you just mentioned some of the internet creates a flurry of commentary on what you do. How do you separate the negative or the things that really, like, maybe would trigger emotions that you didn't expect to have about
Whatever it is I posted?
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you
Well, I've gotten really good at blocking and deleting. So that's one thing, it's just like I realize like this is my Instagram feed, so I don't mind. Brene Brown has this whole spiel about like the arena, and so if you're gonna, like taking criticism from other people, or especially if it's personal, something that's gonna hurt my feelings. Like if you're in the arena with me, like also have 500,000 Instagram followers and all those things, then maybe I'll listen to you. But if you're not somebody who's standing in my shoes in the arena, then I'm not gonna listen to what you have to say. And also, even if you're in the arena, I pay attention to people who approach me with love and kindness. And it's really hard because I am a human being, and I think sometimes when you have a big social media following, people forget that you have feelings, and they say mean things because they think, that you're a robot or something. I think that happens less with me than with a lot of other people because I show my face and I talk about things openly. I do have haters, but I don't have a lot. And I have people who love me and follow me who also disagree with me about things. And so oftentimes they send me private messages and challenge my thinking about things, and I really appreciate that instead of like the public criticism that can be really harsh. So it's something I've had to deal with over the years, and I've gotten a lot better at it. Like getting older is such an amazing thing because you just give fewer and fewer whats about what people think. So that's definitely been true for me. And I realize that's like their mess, not mine. So I just try to remember that.
I loved hearing about your original inspiration, but who are some of the other, maybe contemporary artists or other artists you're working with who you were feeling inspired by?
Oh, like people who are alive today?
Right. And or other like new inspiration.
Okay. Well, probably my greatest inspiration of all time is Alexander Gerard, who is a mid-century designer. Also, I'm sure was friends with Corita and the Eameses. He's like the artist and designer that I love his work more than anything. I got to see a retrospective of his work at the Folk Art Museum in Santa Fe in 2019. He actually founded the Folk Art Museum in Santa Fe, and I went to that show and I got to go into the archives with my friend because we know people, which is really awesome. And oh gosh, there's so many contemporary artists that I love, and I'm caught off guard. I have a list because people ask me that all the time, but I can't think of it right now. But there are just so many people whose work I really admire, and of course, whenever anybody asks me, I'm standing on a stage, I can't remember. So, but if you email me, I'll send you the list, or message me on Instagram. I do answer most questions, not all. wait, you had your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate your work. I started, I found your work when you were doing accountability projects for a year, and it really inspired me. And I wanted you to know that for a year before I quit drinking, in 2014, I did a drawing a day in my journal every morning, hungover for like a year. And so your work, I tell it as part of my story that I was at that kitchen table every morning, kind of only taking up half a page because I didn't dare take up the whole page. And so it was really beautiful, and that accountability helped me like go, oh, I can be accountable to myself. So I want to say thank you. And then for your work, I find a lot of themes with recovery, sayings, and I'm curious about attribution, because you wrote early on in your blog, like, attribution is really important. And I used to take your classes, and I go, well, I'm doing her class, but then I need to attribute it to you, that I'm doing this thing that's attributed. So eventually you said, like, you'll get your own style, which has happened. But with words and phrases, where do you draw the line or differentiate between, like, are they your original words, and then the quotes are quotes that you attribute to the person that actually said it? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's some of the stuff that I put in my work. Love one another. I mean, you know, maybe Jesus said that for some. Hopefully he wasn't the first one to say that. I mean, so some of them are really ubiquitous. And then I always Google and make sure if I think of something that I think is like completely original and unique, like, and that does happen, like on a bike ride, and that is yeah, that's the best. And then I go home and make sure that it's either so general that other, you know, or nobody. So I do attribute whenever it's a quote, or I just won't use it. And now I got, so for those of you who have been following my work for a while, so like I started this project in 2012, 10 years ago. It's called 365 Days of Hand Lettering. So I did a lot of projects where I would just do the same thing every day for a month or for a year or whatever. And it is the best way to become a better artist, is just to do it, practice every day. So I was practicing lettering, which is now something that's like an integral part of my practice and that I get paid lots of money to do. But in the beginning, I was just kind of experimenting with calligraphy pens and all these other things. And I started hand lettering quotes because I needed material. Because if you do something every day, you gotta, you know, especially if you only have 15 minutes to do it. So I was just like looking up quotes, and then I ended up publishing this book called Whatever You Are, Be a Good One. And anyways, that's mostly quotes. And then after a while, I was like, everyone started hand lettering quotes. Like, it was everywhere. And I was like, I don't want to be, I need to move on to the next thing. So then I just started thinking of my own words and phrases and things that were meaningful to me in my life. That's kind of like where I've gone. Not that I still don't occasionally hand letter quotes, but yeah.
So we are at time. Would we take one more question and then?
Of course. I'll take it. Whatever.
I wonder if you could speak a little bit to your use of color. Sometimes something will come up and it's like musical almost. And I wonder, you know, when are you choosing the color? Is it after the drawing?
People ask me all the time if I'll teach a color theory course. And I'm like, no, because everything is so like intuitive to me. I can't explain it. And so I don't really even know why I actually could probably stand to take a color theory course, because then I would maybe understand why the combinations that I use actually work. But I tend to use, this is a really good example. So the screen is kind of making things look a little bit weird, but you'll see primary colors in here. So like green, red, blue, yellow, etc. And then, this isn't always true, but I tend to use warmer versions of cool colors and even warmer versions of already warm colors. So my red tends to be a little orange, my green is a little yellow, my blue has almost a brown tone to it. And so that's been, and like my pink is, except when I use neon, there is a little bit of like magenta in here, but so I tend to have a warm palette, even in my cool colors. And that's something that I'm, like, I don't necessarily wake up one morning and say, I'm gonna use all warm colors. It just kind of like is what I'm drawn to. I also, this is not a good example, well, I guess in a way it is, so I'm using a black background, so I also use a lot of neutral colors mixed in, so blacks, beige, browns, and what that often does is like gives something, a sort of edge to it, I guess, or even in like the show in the museum, we chose for many of the prints, we couldn't do this for more than the ones that were 18 by 24, but a lot of the prints are on brown paper. So I really try to mix, like, or add, mute my colors or use muted tones in my colors. And that's just my color story. And every now and again, my color story changes. Like, I draw digitally on an iPad when I'm not painting, and a lot of my practice is painting. So in the beginning of the slideshow, you saw some of the gallery shows that I had, and those are all paintings. And when I paint, I have like the same colors that I use over and over and over, and that's part of what helps my body of work together, because even if the subject matter is slightly different, the color story is the same, and it's just a big part of my work. I'm very drawn to bright colors and bold colors and clean lines. My work is very graphic. And has very hard edges. It hasn't always been that way. It's really been that way more in the last 7 years or so. Previous to that, I used a very similar color palette, but my work was way more painterly. And my drawing style was much more, like I've illustrated lots of things that where I was drawing in pencil or watercolor. So I've made this journey to where I am now, and I feel like I'm sort of where I want to be, but it took me a while to get there, but my kind of attraction to the same colors and color palette has been pretty long-standing. Every now and again, I'll like add a new color to my work, and people will be like, "Oh, wow," So, and then I'll use it for a while and take it away. Like I don't use purple very often. I don't use orange very often. I just published a calendar that you can get on my website now that has orange in it, and I mean, it's a dark orange, but like, yeah, so those are the two colors I don't mess around with very often unless I have to, or I feel inspired. But color is so fun, and I always tell the artists that I'm mentoring to really like develop a color story, because it is one of the most useful ways to have your art become identifiably yours, is your color palette. So yeah, I had so much fun with color. And how many of you have seen the show already? Okay, hands down. How many of you haven't gone over there yet? Okay, half of you. So you'll see when you walk in my section of the museum, you're gonna be like, whoa, So, and I hope that it makes you happy. So, thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you everyone for coming. The half of you who have not seen the exhibit yet, on now. You have an hour until the museum closes, if you have perfect time to go. There's some museum staff in the room that can give you directions, and essentially go that way, and you'll see Lisa and Corita on the walls. Thank you all for coming, and have a lovely afternoon.